Hi, and welcome to the Courage to Compete on Quality. I'm going to challenge how you think about competitive strategy. Most companies are fighting the wrong fight entirely, and it's destroying value. But there's a better way, and it's hiding in plain sight in your own organization. My name is Jared Gordon, and I am a managing partner at Faculty of Change. We work with organizations that are established market leaders to uncover new ways to grow. And today's session is about competing on quality. These are the lessons we've learned from hundreds of engagements. We define quality not as perfection or gold plating, but as consistently delivering the superior outcomes that your target customers value most. So let's start with an example. There's a company called Crown Cork and Seal. Over 150 years ago, they invented that crown-shaped disposable bottle cap that was found on glass bottles at the time. Yeah, the idea of a disposable product was so impactful that one of their salespeople, King Gillette, decided to apply it to razors and invented the Gillette Safety Razor. Over time, they evolved with their markets to become a leading maker of caps and cans. But by 1957, the company was bankrupt. They were bleeding cash, drowning in debt, and about to disappear completely. Their competitors, American Can and Continental Can, were 20 times their size. And the companies that invented the idea of disposable storage was about to be discarded itself. And so a new president came along, a guy named John Connolly. What he decided to do was to shut the company down for months to figure out a new strategy. To pay for that, he sold off inventory and raw materials to kind of buy himself the time to figure this all out. And he visited the company's numerous plants and offices to get a better read on the market. He decided he made a radical choice. Instead of trying to match the scale of his giant competitors, they were going to compete on quality in carefully chosen markets. And the strategy? Focused only on hard-to-hold applications, beer, soft drinks, aerosols, the most technically demanding use cases they could find. And even though they were going to start with cans, they weren't just going to sell cans. They were going to sell complete packaging solutions with technical expertise for those companies to whom quality mattered the most. So they invested aggressively in superior can technology, and competitors stuck with their old lines, these three-piece cans that became dated very quickly. What was unique about Crown, Cork, and Seal is that they didn't pass all these cost savings on to their customers in the form of lower prices. Rather, they maintained their margins and reinvested in capability, services, and technical support. So by 1989, 30 years later, they had the highest operating margins and highest return on assets in the entire packaging industry. They were in 47 countries, and the giants had stumbled. American Can exited cans entirely and became a financial services company called Primerica that you might have heard of, and Continental Can was broken up for parts. So the lesson here is that they competed against companies with massive scale advantages, broader product lines and deeper products, deeper pockets, and won. Not by being the biggest, cheapest, or flashiest, but being the best at delivering for what their specific customers valued most. They identified customers who valued what they did and delivered superior outcomes. That is competing on quality. So what happens? In an average company, sometimes your margins are shrinking despite your revenue growing. Every sale starts to feel like a battle. Your products are becoming commoditized, maybe indistinguishable from competitors, except for minor features that customers might not even value. You've tried the usual solutions: cost cutting that destroys morale, innovation labs that produce prototypes, but no real breakthroughs, and this digital transformation that digitizes existing problems rather than solving them. The problem is that these initiatives are wrong. They're disconnected from a coherent strategy about how you compete. When growth slows, the result is it's not a spectacular crash. It's this gradual drift from what made the company great in the first place. And this, unfortunately, is how great companies die. Competing on quality has become more important than ever. And it's because of this accelerating change. Without this filter, the strategic filter of competing on quality, you're going to be tempted to chase every shiny object and really accomplish nothing. Your customers, their desires are changing. They're tired of the enshittification of products and platforms, this gradual degradation of services for the sake of growth. They're actively seeking companies that maintain standards. And lastly, the market's polarizing. You're either a budget option or a quality option. There's very little room to be both. Competing on price is one of these strategic dead ends, but saying that the primary reason you choose us is that we're cheaper. Let's look at an example. There's a now defunct airline called Braniff International Airways. They had style and loyalty. They had the coolest planes. They had uniforms designed by Pucci, and they had amazing lounges and unbelievable service. But when Southwest entered the market, they tried to undercut Southwest on price. And that kicked off a period of them gradually losing their identity. The service quality eroded, and they went bankrupt 4 years later. The reality is you can't sell a dollar for 50 cents forever. Eventually, the money runs out, and you've trained your customers to have zero loyalty. They no longer value what it is that made you unique in the first place. The short-term results of cost cutting can be very attractive, but the long term, the reality is going to damage both your business and your market. New entrants may have lower costs of capital and new technology that allows them to price even lower than you. And the types of quality degradation that's required to maintain lower margins is long-term destructive for your business. So while competing quality may work in the short term, in the long run, it's going to train your customers to see you as a commodity, and they will switch to whoever is cheapest. The second of the strategic fallacies is competing on convenience. This is the belief that making things easier creates a moat. It doesn't. It creates an arm race. Look at Sears, the now defunct department store. They pioneered every form of convenience. Catalog shopping was one of the first instances of where the prices were listed, where you didn't have to haggle. As their customers moved, they created suburban stores. They had one of the first credit cards. They innovated with Prodigy. They created their own ISP to allow people to get online to buy their products. But what they discovered was that infrastructure built for today's convenience becomes tomorrow's burden. And convenience is really a feature. It's not a strategy. What delights today becomes the baseline experience for tomorrow. And what you see is that it never ends. Those convenience-minded customers who don't value the outcomes are going to be constantly on the search for convenience. And there'll be new entrants who are able to disrupt and compete on convenience in ways that you haven't even imagined. And the eroded margin required to maintain that convenience is going to limit your ability to innovate in the long run. And the third strategic fallacy is the idea of competing on prestige. So competing on prestige means the primary value of your product or service is conferring status to the buyer. The real challenge is that status is borrowed from culture. It's not owned by you. Look at Gucci, one of the famed luxury houses. They've been around for over 100 years, but they've gone through these very long fallow periods where they've signed too many licensing agreements or become too vulgar. When cultural winds shifted, this logo that once signified sophistication suddenly becomes crass. And that their ability to grow and scale their business is dependent on these cultural winds, which they do not control. And when they get too successful and they undergo these periods of being omnipresent, the success destroys the exclusivity that makes it compelling in the first place. The more that they have grown, the less special they have become. And while it's often desired to be this prestige status player because of the perceived margins associated with it, oftentimes these status seekers have no loyalty, right? All they're looking for is whatever it is that's prestigious. They're not tying themselves to the outcomes that the quality of your product delivers. And that's where real loyalty comes from. So at Faculty of Change, through working with hundreds of market leaders, we've figured out the only way to build a sustainable long-term organization is to compete on quality. Your competitors will destroy themselves competing on price, kind of convenience and prestige. But if you build an empire on quality, you're going to be able to thrive for decades. And so what does competing on quality mean? We've talked about it, delivering superior outcomes that your target customers value the most, but it has to be consistent every time, not occasionally excellent, but consistently excellent. And you need to be able to measure these results. Measurability is important to demonstrate the superior outcomes that you are delivering, because if you can't measure them, you can't really charge for them. Oftentimes, this will result in you having less customers or a more narrow customer segment than you might perceive as being a good fit for you. When customers ask for discounts and question your pricing, if they do it consistently, then they're not your right customers because they're not the customer to whom how you deliver unique value values the most. The longer you pursue quality, the stronger you become. I think of it like a snowball rolling down the hill, that it gets bigger and bigger as it gains more and more of this unstoppable momentum. TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, is the leading manufacturer of semiconductors all over the world. And despite billions and billions of global investment, no one has been able to copy them or even match their success. Why? Because they have this long-term history of quality. Even if you can build the factories and get the equipment and design and build the supply chains, you still don't have generations of employees who've grown up in the organization with the commitment to quality execution that building something like a semiconductor requires. The second is this kind of long-term customer loyalty that allows you to build authority to expand into adjacent products and services. When customers stay with you because you deliver results, not because you build high switching costs around your business, then this is a long-term partnership where you can deliver meaningful value to other aspects and areas of the business. And lastly is this kind of engineering effect, sorry, multiplication effect, where your quality allows you to attract better talent who can build better products that command higher margins that give you more money to invest in this continued excellence. There's no other strategy that really provides you that kind of free margin in which to continually invest in the growth of your business. When we talk about competing on quality, really the question isn't whether you can afford to compete on quality. It's whether you can afford not to. If you're thinking about it or have any questions about how to do it, what some of your unique advantages are, or what your customers value most about your business, feel free to reach out. Start at Faculty of Change or me, one of my colleagues, will respond and looking forward to a meaningful conversation. Thank you.